So I've been talking a little bit about goals and plans and so forth. So I really want to stop and just unpack that a little bit. When I talk about our our innovative culture should be translated through our organizational plans and goals, I'm really talking about things such as your strategic direction should encompass innovation. So it's not only about being the best in a field. So our business wants to be the best in Canberra for delivering this product or service. But you can really expand on that and say, we want to be the best through being innovative and coming up with solutions or innovative solutions to meet our client or end users' needs. You can really start to unpack your vision statement or your mission statement to really talk about some of these things that are really important to your organization, in this case, innovation. And of course, then that translates through to things like your KRAs, which we talked about in the planning unit, but your key result areas or your critical success factors, whatever the language is that you're using at your workplace. And these are the focus areas that permeate through across all levels of the organization. So, if it's a key result area or a critical success factor in innovation, we then start to set KPIs, key performance indicators, for innovation at senior level. So the senior managers have KPIs around innovation, but the frontline workers also have KPIs around innovation. What does that mean? Well, it depends on your organization in terms of what those KPIs look like, but there are indicators of what success around innovation looks like at all levels of the organization. And then that builds into that accountability, which I was talking about previously. The other thing that I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about more in the next slide, but this idea of management's appetite for change and risk, because whenever we undertake any change, particularly innovative change, which has an emphasis on creative thinking, there is some risk involved. And I said that earlier. To hit the ball, you've got to have a couple of swings sometimes. So that means every now and again you're going to have a miss. And what's our tolerance for that? And how much of that risk can we absorb and so forth. We should also think about innovation in terms of our SWOT analysis. So part of the planning process for many organizations is undertaking a bit of an environmental scan and a bit of an internal scan and thinking about what are our organization's strengths or weaknesses, our opportunities or threats. And we can do that around different sections of our business. So we can look around, whatever part of business you deliver on, and think about the strengths and weaknesses that you have internally, and you look outside the organization and think about opportunities and threats. And innovation can really feed into that because often we think about using our strengths to capitalize on opportunities or thinking about our strengths to minimize some of those threats. So the strengths can be around things like innovative thinking or new ideas or so forth. What constraints are currently affect productivity and how can they be improved and eliminated when we're thinking about our goals and our plans? Um, and also thinking about things such as what are our processes at the moment for encouraging innovation. So, do we have R&D? Do we have any research, any time go into research and development? Do we promote the idea of coming up with new initiatives? Do we give people time to play around a little bit with new ideas? What is management's view on this? Do they support it? Do the language that they use support it? Um, and the other important thing, of course, is when we're feeding into our goals and our plans, is how do we evaluate ideas for innovation so that we just don't. So if Tony comes up with an innovative idea and it sounds really ridiculous, that I don't either go, no, that's just silly, or I don't go, yeah, yeah, we'll try anything. We should have a process in place where, we'll talk about discipline in one of the earlier slides, where we have due diligence in place so that we really encourage innovative ideas. And if you've got a great idea that you think is a great idea, here are some steps that you can take to test your idea before you go to management with it, before you ask management to encompass that in our planning. So it might be some basic steps such as, undertake a little business analysis. We might have a template available that is easy to step through where you can think of, okay, what's your idea? How does it change from current process? What are the benefits of it? What are the costs associated? What do you think is going to be any revenue or quality outcomes? What training development? You could be just some basic stuff that you need to consider, so that people, as they're coming up with these ideas, they start to think critically about these ideas. That's a good educational tool, but it's also a good informative tool. By the time they come to management, the idea's been tested to some degree. So if there are some ideas that are high risk, or perhaps the value to them isn't that obvious, that they're getting analyzed before they come to management. So you don't have to necessarily be the gatekeeper at the first gate. People can undertake a bit of analysis themselves. And as I mentioned a couple of times now, risk is a big part of innovation. Every organization will have a different capacity for risk and a different level of tolerance for risk, and a different level of being able to absorb risk within their business model and the business landscape. So, for example, if you're working within the government space, if you're working within a government department, your tolerance for risk may be smaller than if you're a small business, or someone like Facebook, for example, who have quite a significant tolerance for risk. They'll do an update, and if it's not 100% right, they'll just do some patches afterwards to deal with it. So they'll say, oh, even if we upset people, they're not going to leave Facebook. They'll have a bit of a rant for a couple of days, but then they'll be back to normal. So that's an example of a business that has a greater tolerance and capacity to deal with risk than, say, a government agency where you do something that might be wrong and next minute it's on the front page, and everybody's ducking for cover. And of course, when we talk about innovation, we're talking about change. Whenever there is change, particularly around new ideas, there's a risk that something can go wrong. And we can plan as much as we want, but there's always an element of risk with it. So risk assessment becomes a really important process of analyzing and assessing innovative ideas. What are things that can go wrong? How likely do we think that these will go wrong? What should be the appropriate level of action? Should we accept that because it's minimal, or should we look at transferring that risk, or perhaps mitigating that risk, or having a contingency plan, a backup plan in place? But we should always think about, as part of our due diligence, think about the risks associated with any plan for implementing innovation in particular.